Commander Zixtar stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the blue-green planet below. Earth. Such a small, insignificant world in the vast expanse of the Krellian Empire. His mandibles clicked in amusement as he reviewed the intelligence reports. These humans had barely mastered interstellar travel. Their ships were slow, and their weapons seemed almost primitive compared to the Empire's plasma cannons and quantum shields. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human government," his communications officer announced. "Put it through," Zixtar commanded, his forearms folding across his armored chest. A human face appeared on the view screen. The creature looked soft, fragile even. 2 eyes, no natural armor, just pale skin stretched over weak bones. How had such beings survived long enough to reach the stars? "This is President Sarah Chen of the United Earth Coalition," the human said, her voice steady despite facing the might of the Empire. "We've received your demands for tribute. Before you proceed, I must warn you about one thing." Zixtar's translator buzzed with what it interpreted as laughter from his crew. "You dare to warn the Krellian Empire?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "We have one rule," President Chen continued, ignoring his mockery. "One rule that every human lives by, dies by, and will kill for. Do not touch our children." The commander's secondary eyes narrowed. "Your spawn mean nothing to us, human. You will provide the Empire with 10,000 of your young to serve in our mines, or we will take twice that number by force." The transmission cut abruptly. Zixtar turned to his tactical officer. "Prepare the harvest ships. Target their population centers. We'll start with their schools. It's more efficient to collect the young when they're already gathered." Lieutenant Kovacs shifted uncomfortably at his station. He'd studied hundreds of species during his career, watched countless worlds fall to the Empire's might. But something about the humans' warning unsettled him. "Commander, perhaps we should reconsider. Every species has something they consider sacred. For the Altarians, it was their crystal forests. For the Bendathi, their ancestral tombs. When we violated those, the Altarians and Bendathi are now obedient servants of the Empire," Zixtar interrupted, "as these humans will be. Deploy the first wave." The harvest ships descended toward Earth like metallic locusts. Each vessel could hold 500 young beings, equipped with stasis pods to keep them docile during transport. The Empire had perfected this process over centuries, swift, efficient, leaving just enough of a population to eventually recover and provide future tributes. In New Tokyo, 7-year-old Yuki Tanaka was finishing her lunch when the sirens began. Her teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, immediately activated the school's emergency protocols. But these weren't the drills they'd practiced for earthquakes or fires. This was something else entirely. The harvest ship materialized above the school, its tractor beam already locking onto the building. Inside, 300 children huddled together as their teachers tried to keep them calm. The roof began to peel away like paper. Then something unexpected happened. Every adult human within 50 kilometers of the school stopped what they were doing. The businessman in his meeting, the construction worker on her scaffold, the elderly man feeding pigeons in the park, all of them looked up at the alien ship with the same expression. Not fear, not panic. Something far more dangerous. In the command center of Earth's Defense Force, General James Williams watched the tactical display with grim determination. "They actually did it," he said quietly. "They actually went after our kids." "Sir, the Genesis Protocol?" his aide asked. Williams nodded. "Activate it. All of it." Across the planet, hidden bunkers opened. Weapons that humanity had hoped never to use powered up. Not the standard plasma rifles they'd shown the galactic community. Not the simple nuclear missiles that other species laughed at. These were different. These were the weapons humanity had developed in secret, born from the paranoid certainty that someday, somewhere, someone would threaten their children. Back on the Krellian flagship, alarms suddenly screamed. Kovacs stared at his readings in disbelief. "Commander, I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the surface, but that's impossible. Their technology shouldn't be capable of—" The first weapon fired. Not a laser, not a missile, but something that tore through space-time itself. The harvest ship above New Tokyo simply ceased to exist, along with a perfect sphere of space around it. The children fell 2 meters to their classroom floor, shaken but unharmed. "What was that?" Zixtar demanded. Before anyone could answer, more weapons activated. Beams of impossible colors lashed out from Earth's surface. Krellian ships began disappearing, not destroyed but erased, as if they had never existed at all. The Empire's vaunted quantum shields meant nothing against weapons that attacked the very concept of their existence. "Retreat!" Zixtar ordered. "All ships, emergency jump!" But the humans weren't finished. As the Krellian fleet tried to flee, Earth's moon split open like an egg. What emerged wasn't a ship in any conventional sense. It was a weapon the size of a city, bristling with technologies that violated half the known laws of physics. President Chen's face appeared on every screen in the Krellian fleet, but she was different now. The diplomatic mask was gone, replaced by something primal and terrifying. "You were warned," she said simply. "You chose not to listen." The moon weapon fired. Space itself screamed. On Earth, in a bunker beneath Geneva, Chen turned to her advisors. "Contact every human colony, every ship, every outpost. Tell them Code Black is in effect. The Krellian Empire just forfeited their right to exist." "Ma'am," her defense secretary said carefully, "are you sure? The galactic community will learn the same lesson the Krellians are about to learn," Chen interrupted. "Humans have one rule, one single rule." She looked at the screen showing the Krellian fleet being systematically annihilated. And they broke it. In schools across Earth, children continued their lessons, blissfully unaware of the devastation being unleashed in their name. Their parents, however, knew. The factory workers building warships, the scientists developing ever more terrible weapons, the soldiers preparing to carry humanity's wrath to the stars, all of them knew why they did what they did. Commander Zixtar watched his fleet die. Ships that had conquered 100 worlds vanished like smoke. The Empire's greatest weapons were swatted aside like insects. And still the humans came, relentless and terrifying in their fury. "How?" he whispered. "They're just primitives. Their ships are slow. Their weapons are simple." Kovacs, bleeding from a console explosion, managed a bitter laugh. "No, sir. Their merchant ships are slow. Their diplomatic vessels carry simple weapons. But those aren't their real ships. Those aren't their real weapons." "Then what?" "These are their parent ships, Commander. These are the weapons they build when someone threatens their young." The flagship shuddered as another impossible beam struck its hull. Systems failed one by one. In the distance, Zixtar could see human vessels emerging from hidden points throughout the solar system. Not the cobbled-together freighters the galaxy knew, but sleek predators built for a single purpose. "Send a message to the Empire," Zixtar ordered. Tell them we were wrong. The humans aren't prey. They're not servants. The transmission never completed. The flagship ceased to exist between one moment and the next, along with Commander Zixtar and his certainty that humans were weak. But the message didn't need to be sent. Across the galaxy, monitoring stations watched in horror as humanity's true fleet revealed itself. Ships hidden in asteroid fields, weapons platforms disguised as derelict stations, entire moons that were actually planet killers waiting for activation. The Krellian Empire had ruled for 3,000 years. They had conquered species with psychic powers, beings of pure energy, civilizations that had mastered time travel. But they had never faced parents defending their children. They had never faced humans. Within 6 hours, the attack on Earth was over. Every Krellian ship that had threatened Earth's children was gone. But humanity wasn't satisfied with defense. The real fleet was already moving, jumping through space toward Krellian territory. On the bridge of the newly revealed battleship Parental Fury, Admiral Susan Blackwood reviewed her orders. They were simple. Every Krellian world would be given one chance to surrender. Those that refused would learn why human parents had spent generations building weapons in secret, why human scientists had delved into technologies other species considered too dangerous to pursue. "Admiral," her weapons officer reported, "all dimensional shears are online. Reality anchors are stable. The nursery ships report all children are secured in the core systems." Blackwood nodded. The nursery ships, massive vessels designed solely to protect human children during the coming war, were already gathering every human young from across the colonies. They would jump to secure locations, places the Krellians could never reach, because humans learned from their enemies' mistakes. "Send the message to all human forces," she ordered. "The Krellian Empire touched our children. Remind them why that was their last mistake." As the human fleet jumped toward Krellian space, Earth's children continued their normal lives. They played, they learned, they laughed. They didn't know that their parents had just unleashed hell itself to protect them. They didn't know that the galaxy would soon learn why humans smiled when other species threatened their young, because those threats meant the gloves could finally come off. In her office, President Chen received reports from across human space. Hidden factories were already producing more weapons. Scientists were unlocking technologies they'd kept theoretical for fear of what they might create. And every human, from the core worlds to the furthest colonies, was united in single purpose. The Krellian Empire had broken the one rule. Now they would learn why that rule existed. The war hadn't started yet. The real horror was still to come. Because humans didn't just protect their children, they ensured no one would ever threaten them again. And the galaxy was about to discover that human mercy had always been a choice, not a weakness. As Earth's children slept safely in their beds, their parents prepared to write their love in the ashes of an empire. The Krellian Empire's capital world, Krexar Prime, had never known fear. For 3 millennia, it had stood as the shining jewel of galactic dominance, its crystalline spires reaching toward stars that all belonged to the Empire. Citizens went about their daily lives confident in their superiority, secure in the knowledge that none would dare challenge their might. That changed when the human fleet arrived. Emperor Valtor was in his throne room when reality itself seemed to shudder. His advisors fell silent as reports flooded in from the outer defense platforms. Ships were emerging from jump space, not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands. And they weren't using any jump technology the Krellians recognized. "Magnificent one," his military advisor stammered. "The humans. They're not coming from hyperspace lanes. They're tearing holes in reality itself." Valtor rose from his throne, his 6 legs clicking against the polished floor. "Impossible. Such technology would require a species to be desperate enough to risk destroying themselves to develop it." A new voice interrupted. The Emperor spun around to find a human standing in his throne room. Not a hologram, not a transmission, an actual human who had somehow bypassed every security measure, every shield, every guard. The human was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and tired eyes. She wore no armor, carried no visible weapons. But something about her presence made the Imperial Guard step back. "I'm Dr. Maria Santos," she said calmly. "I'm here to explain what's about to happen to your empire. You see, 30 years ago, my daughter was born. Like all human parents, I would do anything to protect her. So I became a scientist. I studied weapons. Not the weapons we showed the galaxy. Those were just to make you think we were harmless." She pulled out a small device and set it on the floor. A hologram materialized showing Earth, but not the Earth the galaxy knew. This Earth was surrounded by layers upon layers of defensive platforms, each one more impossible than the last. Every human scientist, engineer, and builder has spent generations preparing for this moment, Dr. Santos continued. The moment when someone would be stupid enough to threaten our children. We call it the parent protocol. You dare! Valtor began, but stopped when the woman looked at him. There was something in her eyes that the Emperor had never seen before. Not hatred, not rage, something far worse. Purpose. My daughter is 7 years old, Santos said quietly. She likes to paint butterflies and thinks clouds are made of cotton candy. When your ships appeared above her school, when your tractor's beams tried to take her... She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was deadly calm. That's when you signed your empire's death warrant, Valtor's advisor whispered urgently in his ear. Magnificent One, our fleet. It's gone, all of it. The human ships aren't fighting them. They're deleting them. The Emperor's compound eyes focused on the human woman. What do you want? Nothing, Santos replied. That's what you don't understand. We don't want your territory. We don't want your resources. We don't want your submission. We want you to never exist in a way that could threaten our children again. The hologram changed, showing weapon specifications that made the Empire's scientists recoil. Devices that could age stars to death in seconds. Bombs that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Ships that could travel backwards through time to prevent their enemies from ever being born. Every human who has ever lived has contributed to this, Santos explained. Every parent who worked an extra shift to pay taxes that funded black projects. Every scientist who chose weapons research over pure discovery. Every soldier who trained for a war we hoped would never come. All for this moment. Outside the palace, the sky began to change color. The human fleet wasn't bombarding the planet. They were doing something far worse. They were changing the fundamental constants of physics in localized bubbles around Krellian worlds. You're insane, Valtor breathed. You'll destroy yourselves along with us. Santos actually smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Do you know what human parents tell their children about monsters? We say they're not real. We say there's nothing hiding in the dark that can hurt them. She leaned forward. We lie. We know monsters are real. We've met them among the stars, so we became something worse than any monster. We became the thing monsters fear. Across the Empire, human ships appeared above every Krellian world simultaneously, not through hyperspace, not through jump gates, but through technologies that shouldn't exist. They had been traveling to these positions for years, hidden outside normal space-time, waiting for the trigger. And the trigger had been pulled the moment Krellian forces threatened human children. On the agricultural world of Krexvar, farmers looked up to see their 3 suns suddenly burning blue. On the industrial moon of Torgath, gravity itself began fluctuating, making entire cities float into the air before crashing back down. On the military fortress of Zethar, time began moving backwards in random patches, aging some areas to dust, while others reversed to states before they were built. But the humans were precise in their horror. Krellian children were untouched. Any area containing young Krellians was surrounded by protective fields that kept them safe while the adult world burned around them. It was a message written in mercy and devastation. We won't do to your children what you tried to do to ours, but we will make sure you never can threaten ours again. Back on Earth, 7-year-old Yuki Tanaka was showing her mother the picture she'd drawn at school. It was a butterfly, painted in brilliant blues and greens. It's beautiful, sweetie, her mother said, hugging her close. Yuki didn't notice the tears in her mother's eyes or the news playing silently on the screen behind them, showing the systematic dismantling of a galactic empire. Admiral Blackwood stood on the bridge of the Parental Fury, watching as the Krellian Empire's defensive fleets tried desperately to respond. They might as well have been fighting ghosts. Human ships phase-shifted through their attacks, existing just outside normal reality until they chose to strike. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "the Galactic Council is demanding we cease hostilities." "Show me," Blackwood ordered. The screen filled with representatives from dozen species, all speaking at once. The Altarians with their crystalline forms, the Bendathi in their environmental suits, the Vox collective consciousness, all united in their horror at what humanity had unleashed. Violation of every treaty. Genocide on a scale never before. Demand immediate cessation. Blackwood cut the transmission. Send them the following response. The Krellian Empire was warned. They chose to threaten human children. Any species that attempts to interfere will be considered co-conspirators in the attempted kidnapping of human young. Choose your next words very carefully. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of systems and the quiet reports of ongoing operations. Then the communications officer spoke up, voice slightly shaky. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender signals from 30% of Krellian worlds. Terms. Unconditional. They're begging us to stop." Blackwood was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Contact President Chen. Tell her the Empire is starting to understand." On Krexar Prime, Emperor Valtor watched his empire crumble in real time. Worlds that had stood for millennia fell in hours, not to conquest, but to physics itself being weaponized against them. And still the human woman stood in his throne room, calm as death itself. "Please," the Emperor said, the word foreign on his tongue. The Krellian Empire had never begged. "We surrender. We were wrong. We'll never—" "No," Dr. Santos interrupted. "You surrender now because you're losing. You're sorry now because you're suffering. But where was that hesitation when you targeted our schools? Where was that mercy when you tried to steal our babies?" She pulled up another hologram, this one showing human history. "Do you know what we call it when someone hurts a child on Earth? We call it unforgivable. Do you know why we have that word? Because some things can't be fixed with apologies." The Emperor's legs gave out, and he collapsed to the ground. Around him, his advisors were receiving reports that grew more impossible by the moment. The humans weren't just defeating the Empire, they were unmaking it, erasing its ability to ever be a threat again. "But we're not entirely without mercy," Santos continued. "Your children will live. They'll be raised by those among you who never supported the harvest orders. Your species will continue, but your empire, your military, your ability to leave your home systems." She shook her head. "Those die today." "You're condemning us to extinction," Valtor whispered. "Without space travel, without trade. You'll adapt, or you won't. That's no longer our concern." Santos picked up her device. "But know this, we'll be watching, forever. And if any Krellian ever again even thinks about threatening a human child—" She didn't need to finish the threat. As she turned to leave, the Emperor found his voice one last time. "How? How did you hide all this? How did we not know?" Santos paused at the door that shouldn't exist, leading to a corridor that wasn't there moments before. "Because you saw what we wanted you to see. Merchant ships made of scraps. Colonies struggling to survive. Diplomats begging for peace. You saw weakness because that's what we showed you. But why? Why the deception?" For the first time since appearing, Santos showed a genuine emotion, sadness. "Because we knew this day would come. Some species out there would eventually threaten our children. So we prepared. Every human alive knew their role. The merchants who acted harmless while mapping your defenses. The diplomats who played weak while learning your politics. the colonists who struggled publicly while building weapons in secret. She looked back at the broken emperor. We didn't want this. We wanted to explore the stars in peace, to raise our children among friends. But the galaxy taught us that peace is something you have to be strong enough to enforce. So we became strong. Stronger than sanity. Stronger than mercy. Strong enough to ensure our children would never fear the dark. The door closed behind her, and Emperor Valtor was left alone with the death of his empire. Across human space, the recall orders went out. Ships began returning from Krellian territory, their terrible work complete. The empire that had ruled for 3,000 years was reduced to isolated worlds that would take centuries to achieve spaceflight again, if they were allowed to at all. But the real message wasn't for the Krellians. It was for every other species watching. In council chambers and throne rooms across the galaxy, leaders reviewed the footage of humanity's retaliation. They saw technologies that violated the fundamental rules they thought governed the universe. They saw a species that had hidden its true nature so completely that no one had suspected until it was too late. And they all came to the same conclusion: never threaten human children. The Altarians quietly recalled their ambassador who had been pushing for human tribute. The Bendathi destroyed their plans for expanding into human colonial space. The Vox Collective achieved unanimous consensus for the first time in their history. Humans were to be left alone. But the lesson went deeper than fear. It was about understanding what drove a species to such extremes. The humans hadn't conquered the Krellian Empire. They hadn't enslaved it or stripped its resources. They had simply removed its ability to ever be a threat to human children again. It was precise. It was thorough. It was terrifying in its focused purpose. On Earth, President Chen stood before the United Nations of Humanity. The room was filled with parents who had sent their children to safety, workers who had built impossible weapons, scientists who had broken the laws of physics. The Krellian Empire is ended, she announced simply. Our children are safe. The room didn't erupt in cheers. There was no celebration, just quiet nods of acknowledgement. They had done what needed to be done, nothing more, nothing less. The galaxy now knows our true nature, Chen continued. They know we are not the harmless merchants and struggling colonists we appeared to be. They know what we're capable of when our children are threatened. She paused, looking out at the faces of humanity. Some will call us monsters for what we've done. They're not wrong. We chose to become monsters the moment we decided our children's safety was worth more than our souls. But we're monsters with a purpose, to ensure no child of Earth ever faces the horror the Krellians tried to bring. The meeting dispersed quietly. Parents returned to their homes, workers to their jobs, soldiers to their posts. The weapons were not dismantled. They never would be, because the galaxy had taught humanity a hard truth. Peace was an illusion unless you had the power to enforce it. And when it came to protecting their children, humans had decided to have all the power. As night fell across Earth, children were tucked into bed with stories and songs. Their parents kissed them goodnight and whispered promises of safety. And for the first time in human history, those promises were backed by the ashes of an empire and the fear of a galaxy. The humans had one rule. Now everyone knew the price of breaking it. 5 years had passed since the fall of the Krellian Empire. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Trade routes that had existed for millennia were redrawn. Alliances that had seemed eternal crumbled. And at the center of it all, humanity continued its quiet existence, like a sleeping dragon that everyone now knew better than to wake. Ambassador Thavara of the Altarian Collective stood before the doors to Earth's embassy on the neutral station of Harmony Point. Her crystalline form resonated with nervousness as she prepared for her first meeting with the human representative. Like all diplomats in the post-Krellian galaxy, She had studied the footage of humanity's retaliation countless times. It never got easier to watch. The doors opened, and she was surprised to find not a military officer or a cold diplomat, but a smiling young man with a baby carrier strapped to his chest. "Ambassador Thavara, welcome," he said warmly, bouncing slightly to keep the infant calm. "I'm David Chen. Yes, relation to the president, she's my aunt. Sorry about the little one, but the babysitter canceled and, well..." He shrugged with the universal gesture of parental helplessness. Thavara found herself at a loss. This was not the terrifying human overlord she had prepared to meet. Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Chen. Please, call me David. Come in. Come in. Would you like some tea? I know your species can process earth beverages. We've made sure to stock the safe varieties." As they settled into the meeting room, the baby gurgled happily, reaching for the light patterns dancing across Thavara's crystalline surface. Despite herself, the ambassador found her form shifting to create more interesting patterns for the child's amusement. "Her name's Emily," David said, watching with a father's pride. 4 months old, already trying to grab everything she can see. "She's beautiful," Thavara said, and meant it. But she couldn't help the thought that followed. This small, helpless creature was why an empire fell. This tiny being who couldn't even hold her own head up was the reason the galaxy's power structure had been shattered. "So," David said, his tone becoming more professional while still maintaining warmth, "what can humanity do for the Altarian collective?" Thavara carefully set down the datapad she'd brought. "We wish to establish a new trade agreement. Our previous routes through Krellian space are no longer viable." David nodded sympathetically. "I imagine not. Considering those systems are still experiencing temporal fluctuations, we've been working on stabilizing them, but when you weaponize physics, the cleanup takes time. That's actually part of why we're here," Thavara admitted. "Your scientists seem to be the only ones who understand how to fix what was done. We'd like to request humanitarian aid for several affected systems." "Of course," David said immediately. "We never intended for neighboring systems to suffer collateral effects. I'll have our teams coordinate with yours." He paused as Emily made a fussing sound, then expertly produced a bottle from the carrier's side pocket. "Sorry, feeding time waits for no diplomat." As he fed his daughter, Thavara gathered the courage to ask the question that every species wanted answered. "Mr. Chen, David, may I ask you something directly?" "Sure." "How do you do it? How do you go from being the friendly merchants we knew for decades to what we saw 5 years ago, and then back to this?" She gestured at the peaceful scene before her. David was quiet for a moment, considering his words while Emily drank contentedly. "Have you ever seen a human parent with their child in danger? Not just threatened, but actual immediate danger? No. There's a transformation that happens, biochemical, psychological, even spiritual if you believe in that. A parent will lift a vehicle to save a trapped child. They'll fight off predators bare-handed. They'll throw themselves into certain death without hesitation. It's not courage. It's programming. It's deeper than thought, older than civilization." He adjusted Emily's position gently. "Now imagine that instinct applied to an entire species. Imagine generations of humans asking themselves, what if something threatens our children among the stars? And then preparing for that possibility. Not hoping for it, but preparing nonetheless." "But the weapons you used were built by parents," David interrupted gently. "Every scientist working on those projects went home to their children. Every engineer calculating dimensional shear coefficients was thinking about their baby's smile. Every soldier training with those weapons knew exactly why they might need them." Thavara's form flickered with distress. "It seems extreme." David smiled sadly. It is extreme. We know that. We've always known that. But here's the thing about humans. We're capable of extreme love, and extreme love creates extreme responses when threatened. Are we safe? Thavara asked quietly. The other species, are we safe from you? Are you planning to threaten our children? Never. Then you're safer with us than anywhere else in the galaxy. David's tone was matter of fact. We've already received 3 requests for protection from smaller species worried about their neighbors. Did you know the Miraki have been secretly raiding Penthan nursery worlds? They stopped the day after the Krellian Empire fell. Funny how that works. The meeting continued for 2 more hours. They discussed trade routes, scientific exchanges, and cultural programs. Through it all, Emily slept peacefully against her father's chest, occasionally making small sounds that drew smiles from both diplomat and ambassador. As the meeting concluded, Thavara found herself asking one more question. What happens when she grows up? When all human children grow up knowing their parents destroyed an empire for them? David looked down at his daughter with such tenderness that Thavara's form automatically shifted to softer hues. Hopefully, they grow up never needing to know the full extent of what we did. Hopefully, they grow up in a galaxy where no one ever again thinks taking a child from their parents is acceptable. And if someone does? David's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. For just a moment, Thavara saw the same look that had been in President Chen's eyes 5 years ago. The look of a parent who would burn the universe itself to keep their child safe. Then their children will grow up knowing their parents were idiots, he said simply. After Thavara left, David walked to the embassy's observation deck. Emily was awake now, staring in wonder at the stars beyond the transparent aluminum. Ships from a dozen species moved past, traders, explorers, diplomats, all of them giving human vessels a notably wide berth. See all that, little one? David whispered to his daughter. That's your galaxy, full of wonders to explore, friends to make, things to discover. He kissed the top of her head gently. And every being out there knows that if they try to hurt you, Mommy and Daddy will end them. Emily gurgled happily, reaching for the stars with chubby fingers, blissfully unaware that those stars had recently learned to fear her species' love. On Earth, in a secure facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Williams oversaw the monthly inspection of the reality weapons. They sat in their cradles, dormant but ready, like sleeping monsters waiting to be awakened. The technicians maintaining them all wore pictures of their children on their uniforms, a reminder of why these horrors existed. Status report, Williams requested. All systems nominal, sir. The dimensional shears are stable. Temporal bombs are contained. The causality engines show green across the board. And the new additions. Project Lullaby is operational. If anyone attempts another harvest action, we can age their entire species to dust while leaving the children unharmed. Project Playground is in final testing. It creates pocket dimensions where threatened children are automatically transported to safety. Williams nodded. After the Krellian incident, human scientists had not stopped. If anything, they'd accelerated their research. The galaxy had learned one lesson, but humanity had learned another. There would always be another threat. Sir, another technician spoke up, we're receiving reports from the Outer Rim. The Hexari Empire is showing interest in human colonial worlds. Military interest? Unclear, sir, but they've been asking questions about our defensive capabilities. Williams pulled up the files on the Hexari. Insectoid species, hive-minded, traditionally focused on resource acquisition. They had no concept of individual offspring. Their young were raised in communal brooding chambers by the millions. Double our surveillance on them, Williams ordered, and make sure they know we're watching. Sometimes the threat of response is enough. And if it's not? Williams looked at the weapons that had unmade an empire. Then we remind them why the Krellians no longer have spaceflight. Meanwhile, on the former Krellian homeworld, something unprecedented was happening. Human teachers had arrived, volunteers who came not as conquerors, but as educators. They worked with Krellian children, teaching them science and art and history, but not Krellian history that had ended with their empire. Instead, they taught a new history, one that began with a simple lesson: never harm the young. Supervisor Valtin, one of the few Krellian adults permitted to work with the humans, watched as a human teacher named Margaret showed Krellian younglings how to paint. The children, if they could be called that, with their chitinous shells and multiple limbs, were creating colorful murals on the walls of what had once been a military training facility. "Why do you do this?" Valtin asked Margaret during a break. "We tried to take your young. We would have enslaved them in our minds. Why show kindness to ours?" Margaret looked at him with eyes that held both steel and compassion. "Because they're children. They didn't choose their parents' actions. They didn't vote to attack Earth. They're just kids who want to paint and play and learn. But you destroyed us." "We destroyed your empire," Margaret corrected gently. "We eliminated your military. We removed your ability to threaten others, but we didn't destroy you. Your children will grow up. They'll rebuild. They'll reach the stars again someday. And then they'll remember that humans protected them when we had every reason not to. They'll remember that we could have done to them what their parents tried to do to ours, and we chose mercy instead." She smiled sadly. "It's a long game, Valtin. We're not just protecting this generation of human children. We're protecting all the generations to come." Valtin watched the younglings painting, their natural camouflage patterns flickering with excitement as they discovered the joy of creating art. "You're teaching them to never threaten human children." "We're teaching them to never threaten any children," Margaret said firmly. "Ours, yours, anyone's, because that's how the cycle breaks." The Galactic Council met in emergency session for the 43rd time since the Krellian fall. The topic was always the same: how to deal with humanity. Some members advocated for preemptive strikes while humans were spread thin across their colonies. Others pushed for containment strategies. A few brave souls suggested actual cooperation. Counselor Zeph of the Vox Collective transmitted their thoughts to the Assembly. "The humans have submitted their quarterly report. No new weapons developed. No expansion beyond established colonies. No threatening moves toward any species. But they maintain their terror weapons," clicked the Hexari representative. "As is their right," rumbled the Ursine delegate. "We all maintain defenses." "Defenses? They have weapons that can delete solar systems." "Which they've used exactly once," the Penthan ambassador noted, her feathers rustling nervously. "And only after explicit warning. Only after their children were directly threatened." The debate raged on, as it had for 5 years, but the conclusion was always the same: humanity was too dangerous to fight and too valuable to alienate. Their scientists were the only ones who could repair the dimensional damage from their own weapons. Their traders still offered fair deals. Their diplomats still sought peaceful solutions. They were, in essence, exactly what they had always appeared to be. Except now everyone knew about the monster that lived beneath the surface. On a small colony world at the edge of human space, a warning siren wailed. Unknown ships had entered the system without authorization. Colonist Maria Huang grabbed her son and daughter, racing for the shelter as she drilled 100 times. But the ships weren't attacking. They were running. Behind them came a Hexari war fleet, intent on claiming the resource-rich system. They had calculated that this remote colony would be an easy target, far from Earth's main defenses. They had calculated wrong. Maria watched from the shelter's monitors as space around the colony suddenly filled with human ships. Not arriving. They had always been there, hidden in folded space, waiting. The colony's children continued their lessons underground, practicing multiplication tables while reality itself was weaponized above them. The Hexari fleet lasted 17 minutes. The survivors were allowed to leave with a message. This was a mining colony with a population of 3,000. It had 2 schools and a nursery. Did the Hexari really want to see what Earth's response would be to a threat against a major population center? The Hexari Empire formally apologized the next day and rerouted all their expansion efforts away from human space. They also instituted new policies protecting the young of all species within their territory. It was amazing how quickly moral evolution could occur when properly motivated. As the years passed, a new order emerged in the galaxy. Humans didn't rule. They had no interest in empire. But they were the quiet guarantee of safety for the vulnerable. Species under threat could appeal to Earth for protection. Those who harmed the young found themselves facing technologies that shouldn't exist, wielded by parents who couldn't be reasoned with. The first generation of post-Krellian children began to reach adulthood. They had grown up in a galaxy where "don't touch the children" was more than a moral guideline. It was a survival imperative. They formed the Young Protection Alliance, a multi-species organization dedicated to ensuring the safety of all children everywhere. Yuki Tanaka, now 12 years old, attended the Alliance's first youth summit. She didn't remember the day Krellian ships had tried to take her, but she had grown up knowing that somewhere among the stars, human weapons waited in the dark to protect her. "Why did they try to take us?" she asked her teacher during a break between sessions. Her teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, the same one who had tried to keep the children calm during the harvest attempt, chose his words carefully. "Because they didn't understand us. They thought we were weak because we chose to be kind. They thought our love made us vulnerable. But it didn't. No, Yuki. It made us dangerous. Love isn't weakness. It's the source of the greatest strength in the universe. Your parents' love, your grandparents' love, the love of every human who came before you. That's what keeps you safe. Is that why the other species seem scared of us?" Rodriguez smiled sadly. "They're not scared of us exactly. They're scared of what we'll do if they threaten what we love. There's a difference. Will they always be scared? Maybe. Or maybe over time they'll learn what we've always known, that love and protection are stronger than fear and conquest. Maybe they'll learn to protect their own children the way we protect ours." Yuki thought about this as she looked around the summit. Young beings from dozens of species were working together, laughing together, learning together. Perhaps her teacher was right. Perhaps fear would fade as understanding grew. But 10 light years away, hidden in dimensions that physics said shouldn't exist, human weapons waited in patient silence. They would wait forever if needed. Wait and watch, and ensure that never again would any force in the universe threaten human children. Because humans had one rule, and the galaxy had learned that when it came to protecting their young, humans would break every other rule in existence. The empire that had ruled for 3,000 years was gone. In its place was something far more powerful, the absolute certainty that human children would grow up safe among the stars, protected by the love that had remade the galaxy itself. And in schools across Earth and her colonies, children learned their lessons and played their games and dreamed their dreams, never knowing that their parents had become the monsters under the universe's bed, the ones that kept the other monsters away.